I want all of you guys to take a moment and think about your two greatest fears. Just take whatever comes off the top of your head. It can literally be anything. Spiders, drowning, snakes, airplanes, snakes on an airplane, whatever to come to mind. All I want is for you to grab both of them and hold them tightly within the grasp of your hands. All right? 3, 2, 1. Okay. So for me, my two greatest fears are heights and death. As a little kid growing up, I would tenaciously hold my mother's hand with tears rolling down my cheeks as I cried to my dad that, no, I don't want to go on the roller coaster. For the fear of looking down from the top and seeing how high I was before the coaster dropped made my 7-year-old knees tremble. I had thought that this was my only fear until I grew up and realized that it was not just the mere height that terrified me, but the possibility of falling from that high up to my death. There were so many nightmares of falling down that my parents always left room for me in their bed, knowing that their 7-year-old kid would knock on their door and stumble into their room with a tear-stained pillow. So hopefully by now you guys have a grasp of how terrified I am of heights and dying and falling down to my death. But here's a picture that was taken from last year. That's me, standing on the edge of Glacier Point in Yosemite National Park. I'm not only 3,000 feet in the air, I'm also one misstep to falling down 3,000 feet to my death. And the question that may be on your mind, and definitely mine too at that moment, is probably, if you're so terrified of falling down to your death, then why risk standing so close to the edge? Believe me, at first, I couldn't muster enough audacity or courage to face my two greatest fears, but at that moment, I did it not for myself, but for her. This is my girlfriend, Alice. She was the one who took the photo, and no, she did not just tell me to stand on the edge, and no, she didn't force me to by any other means. Rather, she encouraged me to feel that maybe facing my fears just this one time is worth it. It was out of the sheer love that we've developed over the years in our relationship that I was able to open up to the possibility of facing my fears and embracing them. And I'll be honest, I swore I couldn't hold myself up on that rock for more than like 5 seconds. But when I heard her voice say, "I love you, do you think you can stand still for 5 more seconds so I can get this shot?" You know, I stood on that rock for 10. At the time, it felt worth it, and looking back now, it was. When we talk about love, whether as a noun or a verb, we tend to think of it as an emotion or a state of being. But realistically, love is much more complicated in the sense that everyone experiences it differently. So while it might be a usual feeling for some people, it may be unfamiliar for others, and that's okay. In other words, love isn't restricted to just one interpretation or a single experience, but rather, it's accessible by anyone. I believe that everyone has their own story of what love means to them. From the standpoint of my own relationship with Alice, I came to understand that love isn't easy or kind, at least not at first. Rather, love starts off as a fun drive going 90 miles per hour across a road with thousands of potholes that may very well make the average person turn the other way around. And while Alice and I may do anything and everything for each other right now, I came to understand that while Alice may do anything and everything for each other right now, there were so many potholes along the way that made us want to turn the other direction. Moments where it felt like we wanted to throw in the towel and walk away. These moments were unpredictable and almost unavoidable because of the fact that before meeting each other in high school, our experiences with love growing up were different. I don't know about you guys, but growing up, I watched way too many movies and TV shows and listened to so many songs that created this notion of love as being infinitely endearing and dramatically always working out in the end. My parents had a specific movie on DVD that involved a certain Ryan Gosling and Rachel McAdams that set an enormously high standard for romance that love was supposed to be rebellious and exciting, filled with dedication and passion. But while I knew that such movies were for entertainment, I couldn't help but feel affected by mistakenly picking up these expectations of what love should be like, what it meant to fall and be in love, to fall head over heels for someone. These expectations, maybe at 13 years old, I was young and underdeveloped and naive for having these expectations and letting them affect my belief. These expectations made me feel that such love was unreachable, that love wasn't meant for someone like me. So whenever something went wrong, I'd always thought that it was my fault, that maybe I'm not good enough. I knew I was no Ryan Gosling, and I didn't know if I could write a love letter for however many days straight, but at that age, I wanted to at least try. So for the most part, I tried living up to these expectations of love, but by doing so, I wrongfully placed them on the one person who eventually became my significant other. Alice and I started dating back in high school in California. And 3 years ago, when I made the decision to fly 2,800 miles away to attend Georgetown University, I had the expectation that everything would remain the same. I was dedicated to make sure that things would remain the same. Now, people have told me, long-distance relationships never work. But I would always tell them, maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong. I'm really hoping that you're wrong. So for the first few weeks, I didn't worry. We would text each other every day, and we would Skype each other at night, and when one of us missed a call or two because we were too busy or something came up, we didn't mind it. But it eventually came to a point where I would sit alone in my room and wait for hours for her to call back and reply. Or I would begin to hear the ringing of the dial tone more than I would her own voice, or I would be late to class and forget to do my homework, where I would no longer begin to take care of myself because I had placed these expectations on both myself and her. I was unfair to both myself and her. In a period where I should have been settling down in a new place, meeting amazing new people and doing new things, I instead felt lost, isolated, and alone. And in turn, I failed to address the problems that impacted my well-being, as well as failed to acknowledge the reality of my decision that affected Alice as well. I was scared of heights and death, but she was afraid of losing me. That I would distance myself from her emotionally as I had done to her physically, that I wouldn't be there for her when she needed me to be. In a time when I felt like I needed her the most, I failed to realize what she wanted and what she needed during the moments that mattered. We both failed to communicate our feelings toward each other, and by failing to do so, our trust for each other lessened with each passing day. When freshman year spring came around, we had an argument. We didn't talk for 6 months. But during those 6 months, we eventually realized by ourselves the mistakes that we had made and how we could overcome them. And I can break down what we learned from our separate journeys into 3 steps. The first step is to trust the person that you love. And the only way to do that is through communication. Alice and I needed to not only inform one another about our feelings, but also to simply listen. It's okay to be vulnerable around the people that you care about, and it's important to let them be vulnerable around you too. As the saying goes, there is us and trust. Love goes both ways, and it's important to trust that it does, because the second step is compromise. Nothing is perfect. You can't really expect anything to be perfect. Alice and I have different schedules and different time zones, and despite our best efforts to make sure our schedules align, sometimes we just can't account for the moments that are unpredictable. Sometimes we just have to realize that we are individual people first before we are together, that with expectations come anxiety and stress. So to find a reasonable balance between our lives, we had to acknowledge that we needed to focus on our own lives first, which leads us to step 3, self-love and reciprocation. I found that by relearning to love myself, to be able to take care of myself by myself, was I better able to love the people that I care about. During the 6 months when Alice and I weren't talking, I found a way to recover my spring grades and took summer classes to get ahead. I made time to cook for myself again and eat out with friends, and eventually I found a family in Club Filipino here on campus. And for the first time during my first year at Georgetown, I was finally able to say that I was happy, I was having fun, and that I love myself. When Alice finally got back to me after 6 months to ask me how I was doing, I couldn't help but smile. And for the past 2 years, we have not stopped smiling since then because we had rebuilt the relationship that we had on the first 2 steps of trust and compromise, while continuing to follow the 3rd step of self-love, that by loving our own selves, are we better able to love each other. I'm still scared of heights and dying. And while she has told me that she is no longer afraid of losing me, she is still deathly afraid of spiders. And I'm gonna be honest too. I'm afraid of spiders too. But she trusts that whenever she finds one, I'll remove it, and because she's more afraid and I'm willing to overcome my fear for her, and I guess that's how compromise works, but overall, we managed to find a path to make our long-distance relationship work in a way that accommodates the both of us. Since meeting each other and through our experiences together and alone, we've both grown and explored and challenged ourselves to be ourselves, as well as to acknowledge each other and what makes us us. That our flaws or our perfections and expectations should be replaced with appreciation. Whatever loving support we have now is met with, whatever fears we have now is met with loving support and comfort. And while we've become much more trusting of each other than of ourselves, we've become cornier than a corn maze. And not a day goes by where we make each other laugh at least 5 times throughout the day, regardless of how far away we are from each other. Now, I'm not saying that I know what love is, but I know that being with her has been the closest thing to it. That love may be a trial and error, and you never really know what you're up for until you're all for it. I stood on the edge of Glacier Point in Yosemite National Park because I listened to her words and I trusted her. If you can recall your own 2 fears, imagine if you would confront them by yourself. Then imagine the difference that it makes to confront them with the people that you care about, the people that you love. Love may feel reckless and blind, but in truth, it becomes forgiving and kind. And while not everyone can experience the same experience that I've had with love, we can all acknowledge the love that exists in our own lives. We see it when our parents call us to ask how we're doing, when your friend brings us food or takes us out for coffee, or when we wake ourselves up in the morning to start another day of our life because we find love not only in the people closest to us, but within our own selves as well. And it only makes sense for us to be open to both receiving the love that we are given as well as to giving the love that we've received. And while I feel like I figured out what love is, I know that I still have a long road ahead of me to find out what love actually means. Everyone has their own story of what love means to them. And while mine is one that is still being written, I'd like to close with a spoken word letter for the one person whose story continues to be intertwined with mine. Dear Alice, I can tell you what love means in 6 words. I don't know, but that's okay. Coming into high school, I had braces, so whenever I smiled, I would cover it with the palm of my hand or the sleeve of my sweater. But when I met you, I had let go and smiled openly for the first time. Openly for the first time. Looking back, I realized that I never asked for your number because you had asked for mine. 7 years later and 2,800 miles away, I've fallen in love with postage stamps and your handwritten letters. You write that you worry and that we should always call each other whenever we feel the need. And to be honest, we always feel the need. And every night, we always say goodnight to each other before we fall asleep. But every morning, I wake up to the sound of a heavy alarm and feel the weight of college on my shoulders. And as I try to press the snooze button, I see the smile on your face. You are the wallpaper of my lock screen, and I smile back. And I forget how college can make you feel so lost and so alone. I get up off my bed to look at myself in the mirror, and every day I ask, why did I choose to be here? Why did I make things harder? Why didn't I stay? But every time I ask myself these questions, I step back, and instead I look at the road ahead of me. How we are thousands of miles away, but you make it feel like it's only a couple feet. How blind I am without my contacts, but how following your voice helps me see, and how I don't know what love is, but that's okay, because to me, being with you is the closest thing to it. I still don't know what love is, but what I know is that love is hard and crazy, but beautiful and worth all the effort and time that you give. Loving is giving. To love is to live for yourself and them, because you can't help but see how beautifully insane the rest of your life would be having them by your side. How you wouldn't mind growing together and growing old and growing love and giving everything that you have because you feel that it's worth it. And you want to give love because you feel loved, because love is your motivation and inspiration to keep moving, to keep trying, to keep living. And you realize that it takes time and effort, time and again, to find that love isn't perfect, but that it's the flaws that make loving hard but beautiful at the same time. I may say that I don't know what love is, but that's okay, because I have you. And I'm grateful because regardless of how hard life gets, you will always be there to remind me what love is. Everything that I'm doing today, everything that I'm doing now, I do it for more than just myself. I do it for you. That's what love is. That's what love means. That is why I love. Thank you.